Hello, and welcome to the First Year Advising Enrollment webinar. My name is Shelley Lorenzo, and I am the Assistant Director for First Year Advising at James Madison University. Our hope with this webinar is that we can answer your questions as you prepare for enrollment this week. Our intention is to answer very general questions. If you do have more specific questions, we encourage you to reach out to your first year advisor. You should have already received an email from your advisor last week. Their name is listed in the Student Center in your My Madison account as well if you need to double check that. As you're watching this on YouTube, you do need to sign into your Google account in order to ask questions through that live chat feature. Otherwise, you can tweet us at JMU FY Advising, or you can email us questions at firstyearadvising@jmu.edu. We will do our best to respond to everyone's questions. However, if we miss your question or you have a very program-specific question, we encourage you to reach out to your advisor. Excuse me. To start out, 2 quick reminders. Please check your JMU Dukes email regularly. That's where your advisor will be reaching out to you as you prepare for this important enrollment step. Also ensure that you know your My Madison login information. So if you haven't tested logging into your My Madison account recently, we really encourage you to do that to make sure that you're ready for enrollment. You also have to indicate in your My Madison where you want your one-time passcode to go. So if that's your cell phone, make sure that's with you when you enroll in classes. If it's an email address, make sure you have that email account pulled up, again, when you enroll in classes. We just want to make sure that you all are ready for enrollment when it happens. Now I'm going to ask my co-facilitators to introduce themselves. So Chandra, I'll have you go first.
Sure. So my name is Chandra Lane, and I work here in Career and Academic Planning, and I'm the Assistant Director for Staff Training and Development.
Great. And Erin?
Hi, my name is Erin Hawes. I'm the Associate Registrar here at JMU, and welcome.
Great, and we're so glad that you all are here and able to participate in our webinar this evening. We did some looking earlier to try to anticipate some of the questions that you might have. First thing to know is that in your Student Center is where you can access your enrollment appointment. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, we really encourage you to log on to your Student Center in My Madison in order to check out your enrollment appointment time so that you'll know when you need to be ready to enroll. I'm trying to think, Chandra, did you have any quick pointers or tips?
Questions that have come in if you wanted.
Sure.
So the first question here is, if people miss their enrollment date, what should they do?
That's a great question. So your enrollment appointment, once it is open, will stay open. So don't worry necessarily about that initial enrollment time. Once your enrollment appointment opens, it will stay open until July 19th. So when you're looking at that in My Madison, it should indicate the window of opportunity that you have to enroll in courses.
And another question here, and maybe this would be one for Erin, is how are classes being released? Are all of the classes available already, or are they being released over time?
We are actually releasing all seats now so that students are able to enroll when their enrollment appointment happens.
Perfect. It looks like we had one question come in. When will we find out about our roommate? That's obviously a very important question and something that I know a lot of our incoming students are concerned about. Office of Residence Life handles that process. So I would encourage you to double check the steps in your one book. That should indicate to you when you will find out about your roommate situation. Another question that's come in, how do we plan for classes that we may have satisfied by our AP scores since scores aren't available until July? That's a really great question. We have a lot of students that take AP courses in their senior year. And as we know, scores aren't typically available till after the 4th of July holiday. We encourage you to hold off on enrolling any courses that you are anticipating credit for. So for example, if you took US government and you're thinking that you scored high enough to test out of it, we would encourage you to not enroll in that class, enroll in another course with the consultation of your advisor. And just know that if for some reason scores don't go your way, you can enroll it again in the spring semester.
And Shelley, if I could just add to that one, a lot of this is just going to be based on guesswork this time of year. And so it may be really hard to tell how you did on that AP other than just your hunch about how your performance was. So the safest thing is just going to be to avoid that class where you might have credit. But another question has come in about once you find out those scores, how you can change your schedule. And like Shelley said, My Madison is going to remain open through July 19th. And then there's also another period from August 1st through September 5th, where you can continue making changes to your schedule on My Madison based on what you're learning.
Yeah, so I think something that's helpful to know is that you have time when it comes to enrolling in classes. Again, you have that initial enrollment appointment when you're allowed to get into the system and start enrolling in classes. But you have the opportunity to continue enrolling and making adjustments, especially after you have the opportunity to talk to your advisor. So just realize that it's not a one-time deal. You have time to try to get the schedule you would like for the fall semester. I see another question. When do you enroll in your classes, like actually put your courses in your shopping cart? That's a really great question. So you might have noticed already that you can get into the system, start looking for courses and seeing what's available. You can't actually process what's in your shopping cart until your enrollment appointment opens. So you could put courses in your shopping cart, but again, you can't enroll in them until your enrollment appointment opens. One of the big pitfalls with the shopping cart is just because your courses are in there doesn't mean that those seats will still be available when your enrollment appointment opens. So just something to keep in mind. You might pick out some really great courses and have them saved in your shopping cart, but come your enrollment window, there is a chance that they might not be available come your enrollment window. So just be aware of the pitfalls of the shopping cart.
There's another question here. If you've taken a language in high school that doesn't have a language placement test, how do you know which language course to choose? And it is the case where we don't have a foreign language placement for every single language that you could take. And so there you're advised to take the 231 level of a language, which is intermediate. And then you can adjust that placement either up or down in consultation with your professor for that class during the first week. Now, keep in mind, too, that not everyone needs to take a foreign language, and that's going to be based on your major and whether it's a Bachelor of Arts or whether you're doing international business. So not everyone will take a language, but if you'd like to take a language for which there's not a placement test, you would just take 231.
Another question, there didn't seem to be any seats available for one of my requirements. Something to know, too, based on when you looked, as Aaron mentioned earlier, they've been in the process of releasing courses. So if you checked last week, for example, they might not have released those seats yet. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that I would encourage you to reach out to your advisor, again, in advance of your enrollment appointment. If you have a concern about something like that, about a particular course, not being able to find that in your My Madison system. The other thing to know, too, is when you're going through the first semester enrollment modules, they really provide information about both utilizing Schedule Planner as well as searching just through My Madison in order to find courses. So something to keep in mind is if you're using Schedule Planner, potentially some of the parameters you have around your courses might not show all that's available. So if you are looking for that one specific course, like your math requirement, you might be better off just searching for the course through the add feature in My Madison to see what's available there.
And there's the first semester enrollment website, jmu.edu/first semester, has a great section with My Madison tutorials where you can look a little bit more about how to add a class one at a time.
And the first is 1ST for first semester. Another question, can we have more than one schedule in our shopping cart? You can save multiple courses in your shopping cart. Again, just because you save a course in your shopping cart does not guarantee you a seat in that class. So just something to keep in mind. You could potentially have a couple of different sections of a course in your shopping cart, but that does not guarantee you a seat in that course when you go to try to enroll in classes. So just something to be aware of. Another question about parents in regard to the orientation process, what can parents expect? So when you come for summer springboard, that's your first orientation experience. They do have information that is specially designed for parents to be a resource for parents. So be aware that while your son or daughter might be working with their orientation program assistant, which are peer student leaders in orientation, or when they're meeting with their advisors, parents and family members have parallel programming going on at the same time to share more information with parents and families about what to expect when they send their family member, their son or daughter, off to college. So just something to be aware of, is they do offer parallel planning for parents during summer springboard.
There's a question here, what classes are required for the first semester? And is the planner an outline on what classes you should enroll in? So it's important to note here that there are two planners, and I'm not sure which planner the question is referring to. There's Schedule Planner, which is a feature of My Madison, and there's a Gen Ed Program Planner, which is a listing of all of the classes that count for Gen Ed. And so for that question, really the best thing to be thinking about are both classes that might count for majors you're considering and classes that might count for general education. And again, the first semester enrollment website, jmu.edu/first semester, has those enrollment worksheets that will really give you a good overview of what could be on your schedule for the first semester. Your advisor can also help answer any of those questions.
Mm-hmm. Another question, when will I be able to actually sign up for classes? So that when we talk about your enrollment appointment, that indicates the soonest possibility you have to enroll in classes. So when you go into your student center in My Madison, there's a box on the right-hand side with enrollment information. When you click on that, it tells you exactly what time you can start to get into the system to enroll in classes. So whatever time that enrollment appointment tells you is the earliest you can get in there. Again, you can start adding courses to your shopping cart, but you can't process them to enroll in them until that enrollment window opens. We do encourage students to try to build as full of a schedule as possible before they come to summer springboard. So once you've identified your enrollment appointment time, try to get into the system, try to enroll as soon as you can to when that appointment time starts. And then when you come for summer springboard, that's an opportunity for you to work with your advisor to make sure that you're on the right track in your first semester.
And for many students, your enrollment appointment is going to be this week unless you haven't matriculated to the university yet. So it's really important to log into My Madison and find those times soon, because your time might be coming up in the next couple of days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important, if you haven't gone into My Madison recently, it's important to check there, because that will indicate your enrollment time. It also indicates the name of your advisor, and it's important to log in as well, just to make sure that you understand the process for logging in, because JMU has that one-time passcode as well for login. It's important that you have the opportunity to get in there and test it out to make sure you understand how that process works. Is it useful to add courses into the shopping cart to have them ready before the enrollment appointment time begins, or is it necessary to wait to add them to the shopping cart? You can go ahead and add them now. The only thing I would encourage you to do is set very low expectations. So if you go ahead and add a lot of classes to your shopping cart, just realize that by the time your enrollment appointment opens, they may or may not still be available. So it's not that you can't use the shopping cart now. You can still use it. But just understand that saving a course in your shopping cart is not saving you a seat in the class. It's just saving that particular search. So when you're going to enroll in classes, just recognize that some of those courses may no longer be available come your enrollment time.
And if I could add to that too, the availability for what's out there in terms of course selection is going to be changing literally by the minute, based on classes that one student might drop, could be a class that you would pick up. And so if it were me personally, I wouldn't be using the shopping cart at all right now. I would rather wait until it's my time to enroll so that I can see what's available at this moment and not be frustrated if maybe I had one plan in mind and it ends up changing. But every student determines differently kind of how they'd like to use the shopping cart. But you can really think of it like a shopping cart for a website like Amazon, where again, it's not yours until you check out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. We have a question regarding dual enrollments. So what do we do if dual enrollment credits are not showing up in My Madison yet, but those credits should meet a requirement? So I think I might throw this one to Erin, because I know it can take some time for the registrar's office to process dual enrollment credits. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your process for that.
Absolutely. We're continuing to receive dual enrollment transcripts from the institutions that you sent them to us from. And we have a fantastic team that's continuing to process those. So what I recommend that you do is look on My Madison for the dual enrollment credit. And if you don't see it there, ensure that the transcript was sent. You can also have a conversation with your advisor, because if you attended a Virginia Community College system school, then you'll be able to actually, there's a direct correlation in what you took at the community college to what dual enrollment you'll have at JMU. And so that information your advisor can help you with as well.
Thanks, Erin. Looks like we have another question. My Madison doesn't show a name under the advisor section. So advisors aren't assigned until you've completed the orientation reservation and declaration of major step in the one book. So if you haven't had an opportunity to process through the one book up to that point, just understand that an advisor is not assigned until you complete that orientation reservation and declaration of major portion of the one book. If you have already done that and still don't have an advisor assigned, then I would encourage you to email us at firstyearadvising@jmu.edu, so we can look into our systems and work with orientation to see what's going on there. But again, advisors aren't assigned until you complete that step in the one book. Looks like another question. If a dual enrollment course is a prereq, oh shoot, I lost my scroll. If a dual enrollment course is a prereq for a course to sign up for, will that work, or is there a block in place? So if a dual enrollment counts, if a course a student is anticipating credit for counts as a prereq for another course they might need in their first semester, then there's not really a mechanism in place for the system to recognize that anticipated dual enrollment credit. So if you have something like that going on, I would encourage you to talk to your first year advisor, and they can best advise you in that situation. So again, if you're anticipating credit for a course that might count as a prereq for another course, alert your advisor to that, and he or she can kind of help you work through the logistics of how to make things work for your schedule. Another question, where do you find your enrollment appointment? Again, it's in the Student Center in your My Madison. So if you go to mymadison.jmu.edu, you'll see a series of tabs at the top. Click on Student Center, and in your Student Center, you will see on the right-hand side information regarding your enrollment appointment. More detailed information about finding your enrollment appointment is found on those first semester modules, so jmu.edu/first semester 1ST semester.
There's another question here. If you don't want to take a language your freshman year and your major does not require a language, do you still have to take the language exam? So the short answer to that would be no, you don't have to take the language exam. It's optional. And you can always take the foreign language placement exam later. So later on, if you change your mind about your major and find that a language will be required, you can always go and take that language placement exam later.
Another question when it comes to searching for times, can you view specific times of each class and when and where they're going to be taught? So yes, if you go into My Madison and search for classes, when you're searching for classes to potentially add, it will show you the courses that are available. And in the details for each of those courses, it'll indicate the dates. So for example, if it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, as well as the time and the location. So where is the course taking place on campus? Another question, utilizing the My Madison search, it indicated that one course only had 4 seats left. So something to be aware of is our upper class students, our continuing students, they enrolled in their fall classes back in April. So some courses, for example, language courses that a variety of students need to take, some of our upperclassmen students may have already enrolled in some of those classes in preparation for the fall. But we do reserve general education seats for incoming first-year students as well. But just something to be aware of, especially something that's major specific or related to a foreign language. Chances are some of our upper class students might have already enrolled for those classes back in April. Related to schedule planner, are all classes available on the schedule planner? Yes, so anything that's in My Madison will also show up in your schedule planner searches. But again, the thing to keep in mind is if you put specific time parameters around it, for example, if you indicated that you're only available for classes during certain times, and those are the results that you will receive. So just something to be aware of, how whatever information you feed into Schedule Planner, that's what it will use to bring you your search results. So again, if you're looking for a very specific course, I would recommend just using the search and add feature in My Madison as opposed to Schedule Planner, so you can just directly pull up that particular class that you're looking for.
And along with that, if you actually have some openness or flexibility about what you might take from a certain gen ed requirement, like you're interested in several of the courses in Cluster 4 Global, then there's also a way to search for an entire gen ed cluster requirement at a time. And this can be a really big time saver when you go to enroll in your classes. So on that jmu.edu/first semester website, the module that I believe it's module 5 with the My Madison tutorials, really, if you are watching those tutorials, pay close attention to the one about searching for an entire gen ed cluster at once, because that will be your best friend.
Mm-hmm. Another question, how quickly do gen ed classes fill up? I would really encourage you, as soon as your enrollment appointment opens, if you are able to plan on enrolling in courses at that time. It really is in your best interest to get into the system as soon as possible to enroll in courses. I know for some students this can be a really hectic week, as some of our students are still wrapping up their senior year in high school and that sort of thing. But I really encourage you, as soon as your enrollment appointment opens, to log on and to complete your schedule. So much of the information in those first semester modules is designed to prepare you to make the enrollment process as easy as possible. So for example, with your first semester enrollment worksheets, by filling those out, you're really able to target and identify those courses you need for your first semester. So you can do some of the legwork now. You can look on to the first semester modules now, print out your first semester enrollment worksheet now. You can pull a lot of that information together in advance, so when your enrollment appointment does open, you are ready to log into the system and enroll in classes. As long as you have internet access, you should be good to go in terms of enrolling in classes. So again, I really do encourage you, as soon as your enrollment appointment opens, to try to get into the system as soon as possible. Another question, how should we navigate the cluster classes, and in what cluster does math appear? So our general education program is divided into 5 clusters, and math and science both fall into cluster 3. So something to be aware of when you are working with your advisor, is there, in addition to whatever courses your major requires in the first semester, they're also going to be talking to you about your general education requirements. Sometimes general education requirements overlap with major requirements. So for example, if your major requires a specific math course, a lot of times that math course will also satisfy your gen ed requirement as well as that math requirement for your major. You can find more information out about the gen ed program on their website, which is jmu.edu/gen ed. So if you have more questions about the general education program and what that looks like, that can be a really great resource for you as well.
I think along with that, in terms of understanding the clusters, it's important to know that these are thematic groupings of classes that are similar to one another and are designed to meet certain learning objectives. And so when you think about cluster 1, you might think that cluster 1 courses, for example, might be easier than cluster 5, but that really isn't the case. It's just that they are different thematic groupings of courses. Cluster 1, though, is the only part of gen ed that needs to be completed during your first year. And that's because writing and communication and critical thinking are foundational to some of your other courses. But the rest of Gen Ed, it is okay if you're taking classes in clusters 2 through 5 at any point, either from freshman year through senior year.
Another question that's come in, what do we do if we can't get a seat in a class specific to our major? So I think that's a really great conversation to have with your advisor. If there's a course that's required for you to complete in your first semester, the first thing to do is to check to see if there's a wait list. If there is a wait list section for that course, enroll in that wait list section. That gives you an opportunity to try to get into that course, but also notify your advisor that in case there's other information they might be able to provide you, but try to enroll in the waitlist sections of courses if that's available, if there aren't any open seats available to you. Another question, am I supposed to go to JMU for my enrollment appointment, or do I just do everything at home? You just do everything at home. There's no need to come to campus for your enrollment appointment. I realize that appointment language can seem a little confusing. All you need is to have access to the internet to be able to enroll in courses during your enrollment appointment time. So again, you don't have to come to campus for that. You can do that from home or wherever. And you can check your enrollment appointment time in the Student Center in your My Madison account. And if you go to jmu.edu/first semester, 1ST semester, the first semester modules provide a lot of this information there, and they also provide information about how to find your enrollment appointment time in your My Madison. So if you have questions about how to find that, again, it's in your Student Center in My Madison, but the first semester modules also provide information about finding your enrollment appointment time there as well.
And so you're not here on campus for your enrollment appointment, but you are here on campus for orientation. Part 1 of orientation is called Summer Springboard, which is June and July. And Part 2 of orientation is called 1787, which is in August. And at those points, you'll have a chance to meet with your advisor who can give you feedback on that schedule that you've created from home.
Mm-hmm. It looks like we got a question that came in, Chandra, that you already answered, but essentially, can we choose classes from clusters 3 to 5 as an incoming freshman? And as Chandra indicated earlier, yes, you can most definitely select courses from clusters 3 to 5 as an incoming freshman. As Chandra mentioned earlier, cluster 1 is a bit of a priority. Students must complete their cluster 1 courses during their first year at JMU because they are considered foundational to any major that you ultimately choose, but clusters 3 to 5, those are perfectly fine to take as an incoming student as well. Another question, at orientation, when we meet our advisor, will our advisor look at our schedule? Yes. So your advisor will be reviewing your schedules in advance of Summer Springboard when they meet with you. So chances are when you meet with them at Summer Springboard, they might have some notes and ideas already in place for you. But that doesn't mean you can't work with them now. So as you're crafting your schedule, if you have questions, again, I would encourage you to reach out to your advisor as soon as possible. As you're working on creating your schedule, as you're finalizing your schedule, they're a resource for you. But yes, you will meet with your advisor at Summer Springboard, and that's another opportunity for you to ask them questions in person as well. I see a question here regarding loan information. I would encourage you to reach out to our Office of Financial Aid and Scholarship as they are best able to answer those questions. So that would be a really good resource for you if you have questions about anything related to financial aid, to reach out to that Office of Financial Aid and Scholarship. Another question, how important is it to be ahead of the deadlines listed in the one book? You don't necessarily have to be ahead of them, but we encourage you to meet them as they approach, because that's really going to help you stay on track and stay on top of this information. The deadlines are listed in the one book, so we really encourage students to try to meet those as they occur so they can stay on track before they enter this fall. Orientation tries to spread them out in a way that it's not overwhelming, everything's not hitting you at once. But again, I really encourage you to work through them as those deadlines approach, and really give it your due diligence. Related to that, be sure that you are checking your JMU Dukes email regularly. That's where your advisor is reaching out to you. That's where orientation might be reaching out to you. So it's really important for you to stay on top of your JMU Dukes email account. Another question, how long does it take to hear back from an advisor? Most of you should have heard from your advisor by now. In that initial email, they have indicated their availability, especially during the enrollment window. So your advisor would have specified their availability during that time. If you do have additional questions or concerns, you can always reach out to First Year Advising at firstyearadvising@jmu.edu. But again, your first year advisor really is your first point of contact for any advising questions.
And when your advisor emailed you that information about how they could be reached and some times when they would be available this week, it might also be helpful to kind of think about if you sent an email that's really detailed and you haven't heard back after a day or so, your advisor might also be trying to get back to a number of other students that are their advisees too. And so you can always give your advisor a call, and sometimes your questions can be answered more quickly that way as they're kind of trying to make their way through. You know, this can be a really busy time of year with some of those questions that are coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would encourage you to be patient with them, as they do have students that they're working with, and especially like Chandra mentioned, sometimes it's not that they're not getting back to you, they're just trying to make sure that they have the right answers for you. So they might be calling our office, they might be calling the department. So just something to be aware of is that it might take them a little bit to get back to you. Another question, and Aaron, you might know the answer to this one. If a dual enrollment transcript from a Virginia community college was sent to JMU for admissions purposes, does it need to be sent again for class enrollment?
So what we do is we do use the transcripts that were sent for admission purposes. The issue may be is that you are currently enrolled into a class during that time. So make sure that we get your final transcripts with the grades posted so that we can apply the credit.
Thank you. Question related to AP classes. So should we put a class in our shopping cart that might be covered by an AP credit class that we just haven't gotten back yet? So we encourage you to hold off on enrolling in any courses that you anticipate receiving credit for. So if there is an AP course that you anticipate that you might receive credit for that class, we encourage you not to enroll in that class at this time. Once you get that final score back in July, again, enrollment will still be open at that point in time. So if you need to make changes, you can do that then. But in the beginning, we encourage you not to enroll in courses that you anticipate receiving credit for. Related to transcripts, what do we do if our college transcripts were never sent to JMU and will not be there by the enrollment dates? Well, I know we still want them, right, Aaron?
Absolutely. Send them in as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm. As soon as you can get the transcripts in, that's the sooner a registrar's office can process them and apply them to your current JMU transcript. So even if you haven't already sent those in, be sure to send them in as soon as possible, so the registrar's office can work on those. And same rules apply. If you anticipate receiving course credit that might overlap with a gen ed or something like that, we encourage you not to enroll in those courses. Don't enroll in courses that you anticipate receiving credit for. And then once the credit is applied to your JMU transcript, then you can work with your advisor to see if you need to make any adjustments. Question about residential learning communities. I really encourage you to reach out to the coordinator for the community that you were enrolled into, as each residential learning community can look very different. So we don't want to provide any bad advice regarding residential learning communities. So I would just encourage you to reach out to the coordinators of that community. They will provide specific information regarding courses you may need to enroll in as part of that. So that's just something to be aware of, is if you are participating in a residential learning community, sometimes there are specific sections of courses you need to enroll in as part of that. That could potentially change your schedule. But again, reach out to the coordinators of those learning communities because they can provide that information for you.
And I would just add to that too, sometimes students are confused about what residential learning communities are. And there's some great information about the learning communities in your one book. But just in general, it's the idea that you might live together with some students who have a similar interest area and take courses together too. So this question was kind of how this would affect the students' enrollment. So like Shelley said, there are kind of specific sections of classes that you would be taking with your learning community, but that coordinator is best suited to answer those more specific questions.
Another question about foreign language. I am confused on what language to sign up for if I am brand new to the language. So if you're starting out brand new in a language, you take 101. So for example, if you are interested in starting with Italian, you would take Italian 101, French 101. So if you're starting with a brand new language that you've never studied before, you would enroll in 101. Another question, how do I switch my major? At this particular juncture, you would go back to the one book and go to the orientation reservation and declaring a major step. So if you have already completed that step, but now you want to change your major, again, you go back to the orientation reservation and declaring a major step in the one book. The one thing to be aware of is if you are changing your major, it could potentially change your summer springboard date because not all colleges are represented all days. So that's just something to be aware of if you need to change your major at this point. Band. Do you know the band schedule and how that might impact when I should schedule my classes? If you're in the first semester modules, if you go to module 3 under special students categories, there is more information for students participating in marching band there. So again, first semester modules, module 3 under the special student categories, they have information there. It's really just being aware of the schedule for marching band and making sure you don't enroll in classes that overlap at the same time, but more information is provided there. Waitlist, if I am placed on a waitlist for a class, what is the likelihood that I will be enrolled in it? For a waitlist during this initial enrollment window in June and July, we will start working through those waitlists end of June. So just something to be aware of as you're enrolling in classes. You might hope or anticipate being taken off those wait lists soon, but just be aware that advisors won't start reviewing wait lists until later this month. And we'll be processing wait lists, so it could potentially take a while. For example, with all the gen ed courses, it could potentially take a while to get to something like WRTC 103, for example. So just be aware that it might take a while to get to that particular class as they're processing wait lists. Waitlists will continue to be looked at and run through until July 20th. So advisors will be going through waitlists, trying to move students off waitlists. And so that's just something to be aware of, that we are working through those pretty diligently through the end of June and majority of July, trying to get students off those waitlists. If we are able to make adjustments to your schedule, you will receive an email indicating that your schedule has been adjusted. And as always, if you have questions or concerns about that, or if you feel like things aren't moving, I would encourage you to reach out to your first year advisor.
And one more thing to add with the wait list, I would say in summers past, we've had a really good track record in terms of being able to get a lot of people into the courses that they're looking to add through the waitlist function. However, it's also really important to know that when you put yourself on a waitlist, you really want to make sure that that is a class that you absolutely want to have, because what happens when you're taken off a waitlist is that the rest of your schedule could potentially change. You would stay in the same other classes, but they might change in terms of the professors or times of day in order to get you into that one class that you've waitlisted. So it's important to know that you're giving up a little bit of control with your schedule when you put yourself on a waitlist, but that there is a pretty good track record in terms of getting you into those classes that you might need.
We really do try to make sure students, especially if it's a course that's required for you in your first semester, we really do work diligently to make sure that you have access to those courses. A question related to enrollment. If I sign up for a class and then later decide to drop it and add another, can I do that at any time following my enrollment appointment? Yes is the short answer, but what we encourage students to do is to swap courses, not add and drop. So what the swap does is it will only drop you from the course you are currently enrolled in is if it can ensure a seat in the course you want to enroll in. For example, what can happen sometimes for students is they might drop a class, and then by the time they go back through the system to try to add the next class, and there was one seat left, that one seat is already gone. So we do encourage students to take advantage of the swap feature in My Madison so that they don't lose both opportunities. But yes, your enrollment appointment, it's a little misleading. It sounds like it's a one-time hit, but it really does stay open until July 19th. So once your enrollment appointment opens, that window will stay open for several weeks. So you have the opportunity during that time frame to go in there and make adjustments to your schedule. So you could swap classes if you needed to, or if, for example, after talking to your advisor, they have a different recommendation, then we would encourage you to swap that class based on their recommendation.
And remember that there are 2 open enrollment time periods. There's this week through July 19th, and then August 1st through September 5th. Now, it's also the case where if you're trying to swap courses for your schedule, there's going to be different availability on My Madison every time you log in, because other students are on the system changing their schedule too. And in that period of August 1st through September, upper class JMU students are also going to be on the system making changes to their schedule. So you might also find some different openings in the system later on than you might find in this early period. So it's always worth taking a look.
I see a couple of questions related to math, so I figure maybe Chandra and I can just have a math conversation to try to tackle these. First question, do I have to choose the highest math course based on my math placement exam score, or can I choose a more basic class? Same question related to math. What's the difference between some of the math courses? The first thing that I would encourage you to figure out and try to understand is based on your major, what are the math requirements for your major? Some majors have specific math requirements and other majors don't. So it's really important for you to understand based on your major, what are the expectations as far as math courses go. Once you have an understanding of what math course that your major might require, if it does require a math course, is to then look at the math placement exam matrix, and that will help you indicate based on your math placement exam score which math you've tested into. So for example, for some students, let's say that they're in a major that requires statistics, but if they didn't score high enough on the math placement exam to get into Math 220, then they would take another course as a prereq to get into Math 220. So just something to be aware of. Again, make sure you understand, number one, if your major requires a specific math, and then number two, what is that specific math? And then looking back at your math placement exam test scores to identify, based on your scores, which course do you need to take in order for you to meet your math requirements. Chandra, I don't know if you have any other advice or insight on math recommendations.
Yeah, I don't know if people can actually see this on the screen, but this is the math placement matrix. And as Shelley was indicating, you're trying to figure out which major is which math class is my major requiring. That's the first column in the matrix. And then from there, it's just saying, based on your placement score, where would you start so that you can eventually get up to the point of that math class that your major requires. There is also this question here about the difference between Math 105 and Math 155. In general, this is painting in very broad strokes, but Math 105 is to prepare you for statistics, and Math 155 is to prepare you for calculus. For calculus, though, there are some different ways based on your math placement score that you can get up to that introductory calculus. There are kind of some different levels of pre-calc that might be recommended for you, and that math placement matrix can really help. Your advisor can also be a good resource in navigating some of this. And during that first week of a math class that you might be taking, your math professor can also kind of help you figure out if you're in the right place.
I see a question related to Cluster 1. Cluster 1, is it 9 hours required for the first year? So as I know Chandra talked about earlier, Cluster 1 is the only one of the general education clusters that does have a timeline for completion. Students need to complete their Cluster 1 courses in the first year. So it's 9 credit hours, but in terms of how that plays out over the first year, is between you and your advisor. Some students might take 2 classes in the fall and then 1 in the spring, or vice versa. We also have students that might be bringing in credit, especially for the writing course, WRTC 103. So yes, you do need to complete cluster 1 in your first year, but how exactly that plays out is dependent on your transcript, what you might be bringing in, what your major requires, that sort of thing. So something to talk about with your advisor. Question related to transcript. Who is supposed to send in the final transcript from the high school senior year? I think I'm reading that right. And for dual enrollment, how does the student send their credits for that? As far as dual enrollments, it depends who is giving the credits for those dual enrollments. I know especially in Virginia, it's through a lot of our community colleges. So whomever is providing the college credit, you would reach out to their registrar's office to send the transcript to JMU, especially as Aaron had mentioned earlier, if it's a course maybe that you're just now wrapping up, and so maybe you submitted a previous transcript as part of your admissions, but you're now taking this course that admissions wouldn't have yet. It's important to send those transcripts in as soon as possible. So I would encourage you to reach out to the crediting body, if that's a community college or another college or university, to send in those dual enrollment credits as soon as possible if you haven't already done so.
And if you're not sure who to contact, your school counselor is often the liaison between your high school and that community college. So your school counselor can be a good contact to figure out who do I need to reach to be able to send this transcript.
Mm-hmm. Question related to courses that have multiple faculty listed as the instructors for that course. Different departments list their courses a little bit differently. So some courses might have multiple instructors, especially for something like a science. There might be one instructor for the lecture and another instructor for the lab. So that's just something to be aware of. Different departments kind of handle that process a little differently in terms of who are the instructors of record for different courses. But that's just something to be aware of when you're signing up for courses, is that the names of the instructors will be listed in that course search. And you can always check back in the system later if something does change. But some courses might have multiple faculty members listed, especially if it is a course that has a lab attached or maybe some breakout sessions associated with it.
It looks like there have also been a number of questions about Gen Ed in general and kind of what it looks like to be taking classes from the different clusters. And so again, here's another visual aid that I'm not sure if you can see or not, but this is the Gen Ed program planner. And Shelley mentioned earlier that if you go to jmu.edu/Gen Ed, you can print out one of these if you'd like. And here it's going to tell you all of the different requirements within each cluster. And it's important to know that for your first semester, even though you're creating a schedule of 5 classes, it's not that you have 1 class from each cluster. Your schedule might have 2 classes from cluster 1, 1 class from cluster 3, a class from cluster 4, and a class for your major. So between now and when you graduate, these are going to be spread out on your schedule. Sometimes students feel like they need to finish up their general education classes early in order to work on their major requirements, but actually it's going to be a much more interesting and kind of richer educational experience for you if throughout your time at JMU you have a balance of major courses and gen ed courses. And so just remember that between now and graduation, you're going to be completing 1 class from each bold heading within each cluster. So hopefully that kind of answers that question about sequencing.
Mm-hmm. Another question related to honors. I can't find honors 100 in the course listing. How do I enroll? It should be there in your My Madison. So I would encourage you to just search directly in My Madison to see for the honors 100. We have some of our friends on the sidelines that did a quick search and identified that it was there. Another question, a lot of math questions. Where can we find the math placement matrix? It is in module 3 of the first semester modules. So jmu.edu/first semester, 1ST semester. The math placement exam matrix is there.
And for any of your placement test scores, whether it's AP or foreign language or math placement test scores, all of your test scores are going to show up in My Madison in your Student Center. There's a pull-down menu where you can choose View My Test Scores. And at the bottom of that test score page will be links to all of these documents helping you understand your foreign language placement score, your math placement score. And so that's kind of another handy place while you're looking up your scores where you're going to have that easy reference.
Mm-hmm. Number of courses for the first semester. What is the typical number of courses for a first semester student? We encourage most students to enroll in anywhere from 14 to 16 credit hours. Course-wise, that could look anywhere from 4 to 5 or maybe even 6 courses. It really depends on their major and their program. So for example, students that are in the performing arts might have a couple of 1-credit classes, so it might look like they're taking significantly more classes, but credit hour wise, maybe it balances out with, again, what we encourage most students to take. So most students will probably take around 5 courses. Again, anywhere from 14 to 16 credit hours is pretty standard for students here. Another question, how do you choose classes if you are trying to double major? That's a fantastic question. At this point in time, you can only declare 1 major. When you start classes in the fall and August, you can declare your 2nd major at that time, but at this point you can only declare 1 major. And I would encourage you to check out the first semester enrollment worksheet for that other major that you're considering. So that way you can kind of cross-reference. This is what I want for my major, my current major I'm already declared in, and this is what I might need for this other major that I'm interested in declaring as well. So if you're interested in double majoring, check out the first semester enrollment worksheets for that other major that you're interested in.
And in a similar way, if you're undeclared and you're considering multiple majors right now, you might be looking at multiple enrollment worksheets and you're kind of just looking for overlap. You'd be looking for classes that you might be able to strategically take because they would count for several of the majors that you're thinking about. Or if you're really considering a lot of majors, then your first semester might primarily be a schedule of general education courses and a course that we have called UNST 102, which is a class that helps you choose a major or career. And so with that, the enrollment worksheets are something that you can, kind of try to find as much overlap as possible when you're considering more than 1 major. And then your advisor can also, help confirm any plans that you have about a potential schedule.
It looks like we have our last question come in. If you send another question, we did get a chance to respond to it. We'll try to comb through later. And obviously, if you have very specific questions related to your academic program, we encourage you to reach out to your first year advisor. But I really like this last question. Why is JMU a good university? Well, number one, it's not a good university. It's a great university. I think one of the phenomenal things about JMU is the people that are here. JMU is able to attract some phenomenal people, from our students to our faculty to our staff. JMU just seems to have some really phenomenal people working and studying and living on this campus. So I'm going to let Erin and Chandra take a stab at answering this question as well.
Yeah, I would wholeheartely agree that this is a great university. Students talk about bleeding purple, and they really do. JMU becomes kind of your lifeblood once you're here. JMU is a really friendly place. People talk all the time about holding doors open for one another, and they really do, both literally and figuratively, try to make this the most welcoming place possible. So it's a really great place to find yourself for your college experience, and I think that might be why we've all made it a home for so long.
I definitely want to agree with Chandra and with Shelley with everything they've said. One of the things I really like are the resources we have for our students. We are all here to help you, and so it's really a place where all the faculty and staff are here to help the students, just as the students are here to help each other. And we have so many resources available. So I just encourage you as a student, when you're coming in, reach out if you need some help with anything or if you need advice. We have the resources here to help you, and they're available at JMU.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you all so much for viewing our webinar this evening. We got a lot of great questions, so thank you so much for participating with us. Again, if we weren't able to get to your question, we're going to go back through and try to troubleshoot as we can to make sure we answer your questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to us at firstyearadvising@jmu.edu. And then also, I would encourage you to reach out to your first year advisor if you haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. Again, their name is listed in the Student Center of your My Madison. And thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you at Summer Springboard. Have a good evening.